for joining this webinar. I know it's lunchtime for most of you and you could be doing better things. So again, thank you for coming here. And my name is Vivas Bhattacharya. I'll be giving you this presentation about single page application using AngularJS. So just a little bit about me. I've been in the IT industry for the last 25 years, and recently I've been working with mobile applications for both iOS and Android, and as well as website development using AngularJS. So that's what I've been working on lately, and I have a blog that I run, and the address is over there, and I post articles once in a while there. So feel free to check it out when you get a chance. Okay. So the way we're going to do this is that you can ask me a question at any time during the presentation by posting a message in the chat, and I'll do my best to keep an eye out for them and answer them right there. If not, at the end of the presentation, I'll definitely go through the chat messages and make sure I cover all the questions that you may have. So once again, feel free to ask questions as I'm speaking, and I'll keep an eye out for the chat message. But sometimes I get lost in conversation and I don't keep an eye out for the chat message, so I'll catch up with that at the end of the presentation. Okay, great. So here is a list of topics that I'll be covering. So we're going to get into the basics of single page application, or SPA as I call it here. What is it? What makes a good SPA? Just to get the understand the basics of SPA before we get into actual coding using AngularJS. That's going to help us create really good SPA applications. Then we're going to discuss the benefits of SPA and some of the not so great stuff about SPA. And then we're getting to AngularJS and what are the different options available to us to create SPA applications. And specifically, we're going to look into one of the options, which is the route service, which is the route service is the most advanced option available from AngularJS to create SPA. So we're going to delve a little bit deeper into the route service there. Okay, make sure you can see my screen as I'm giving presentation. Also, the handout is posted. You should be able to download the handout from the GoToWebinar application. If you cannot, you can send me a text message, chat message, and I'll do my best to give you the handout. Okay. So before we get into actual coding, let's understand what SPA is. So what is single page application? That is the question we have to start to answer here. The way I define a single page application is an application that loads a single HTML file. So at the beginning of the application launch, it loads a single HTML file, and from that point on, it shows or hides different DOM elements to give the impression to the user that there is a page transition going on. So from a user perspective, it looks like a regular application, like a traditional application. The user is going through different pages, but behind the scene, the application actually has loaded a single HTML file, and it's not constantly contacting the server and downloading a new HTML file. Okay, that's a very simple example of SPA. So what are some of the examples? Gmail would probably be the first SPA that really proved itself as an SPA. So if you're a Gmail user, you can read emails, you can compose emails, you can switch between different labels and categories without leaving the page. And that's a great example of an SPA. There is another SPA that I often use to give demonstration is this sushi store. So let's take a quick look at it. So here we have a nice example of an SPA. First, we see the product listing page. And if I click on a product, it opens up the details and nutritional information and things like that. And I can navigate through different products, and I can add them to the cart. Okay, and then I can click on checkout, and I can place the order or cancel the order. I can change quantities and so on. And I can place the order. So the entire product navigation to adding to cart and checking out is all done using a single page. And I'm going to come back to this demonstration later on because there's a lot of best practices exposed by this sample application. So let me go back to my slides. All right. So one of the things you're going to be seeing in this presentation is the terminology called page and view. So we need to distinguish between the two. So a page is a HTML file that, or some kind of HTML document that the browser loads when the app starts up. And the page does not change. But within the page, you're going to see different views displayed. So in this diagram, we have the page showing the product list view first, and then the user is navigating to the product details view, and then the user is navigating to the shopping cart view. So the views are constantly changing, but the page itself remains the same. As you can see that the header, which is the Rob's Deli, and the footer is the same. They don't keep changing, but the main body is changing all the time. So when you see the word page, are displays within the page, and they keep changing, and the user is navigating between the views. To the user, though, it looks like a traditional application. It looks like the user is navigating between the pages, but it's really they are navigating between the views. So why do we need SPA? Why do we start to create SPAs? The biggest benefit of SPA is the rapid transition between the views. So to the user, the page transitions will appear very fast, faster than regular applications, because the browser is not continuously downloading new HTML documents from the server. And as you learn more SPAs, you'll find techniques that you can use to minimize the number of network calls or AJAX calls to the server. So one of there are a couple of examples I put in here. So one of the examples is that we can cache data, and because the page is not getting reloaded, all our JavaScript objects are alive and can be shared between the views. So we can store cached data in JavaScript objects, and multiple views can access the data and share the data. For example, if you load the product catalog once, there's no need to keep loading it over and over again. Every time you need to show the list of products. That data can be cached in JavaScript. You can also accumulate user input in memory. So for example, as I'm adding items to the cart, the shopping cart can be modeled using JavaScript. You don't have to keep sending the items in the cart back to the server. So we build up the shopping cart in JavaScript, and when the user pays for it, it is at this point that we send out all the items in the cart to the server. So these are some of the examples of how we can minimize the network calls if you're using SPA. So once again, all of this is possible because our JavaScript object model stays alive as we are switching between different views. Okay, so SPA is great, and especially the users really love it because how fast it is. And with tools like AngularJS, building SPA is fairly easy. But not everything is great about SPA. There are some shortcomings. There are some problems with SPA. The biggest problem with SPA is that it's not search engine friendly. That's because most of the content is getting loaded by Ajax. You know, it's not in a traditional application. The server renders the data in HTML, renders the content in HTML, and HTML gets downloaded by the browser. So traditional websites are much more SEO friendly because the SEO can crawl through the links and locate all the content and index them. But with the SPA, your content is loaded using JSON web service and so on. So that's not easy for the search engines to crawl and index. There is another shortcoming, not as serious, which is if you have ever used page analytics tools, like from Google or Adobe, those tools would typically capture the page load event. So as the page gets loaded by the browser, they will measure that analytics. They will keep track of how many times the page got loaded and so on. But with SPA, though, we are not loading the page continuously. We are loading the page only once, and we are transitioning the views. And so these analytics tools will not be able to monitor these view transitions because they are not designed for that. So keep an eye out for problems like that. Okay, so next we have what makes a good SPA. What are some of the best practices for SPA? So that's kind of your benchmark. You can use that to measure success of your project. Also keep these in mind when you are designing a SPA. So first of all, the main reason we use SPA is to speed up the pages or the view transitions. So make sure that the page load or the view transitions are faster than it would be if you are using a traditional web-based application. So the speed improvement should be noticeable. Okay, and as you are switching between the views should be bookmarkable and users should be able to share the links. So let me go back quickly to my diagram here. The user is navigating from the product list view to the product details view to the shopping cart view, so on. So each of these views should be bookmarkable. And user should be able to send out the link to somebody else, and the other person should be able to click on the link and get right to the view. Okay, so that's a challenge we need to solve. And next is that the back navigation should work as expected. So as the user is navigating between the views, the user should be able to click on the back button and navigate back through the history. Okay, so again, this is not the way the browsers were designed originally. This is not the way traditional web applications work. but we have to maintain the existing model for web application, which is bookmarkability, shareability of links, and the back navigation. All of that should be there for an SPA as well, because that's how the way users expect to use the application. Finally, as the user is navigating back to a view, we need to present that view exactly the same way as the user left it. Okay. So again, going back to my diagram. So let's say the user goes from the product list view to the details view and clicks the back button. We need to present the product list view exactly the way the user left it. That means if the user had scrolled down in the list, we have to maintain the scroll position, okay, or any kind of user input that the user might have entered, we have to preserve that. So that's what I'm talking about by they're saying we should maintain the state of the view, like scroll position, user input. If there's any panel that's expanded or collapsed, we have to maintain the state. So these are some of the best practices of SPA. So finally, before I get into AngularJS, I would like to point out that it's not an all or nothing proposition. That means the entire website does not have to be an SPA. So for example, if you're building something like Amazon, the whole website, which is quite huge, it does not have to be implemented using a single page application, because that'll be truly challenging and the benefits are minimal trying to do something like that. Instead, what you need to do is you need to break up the features. So you can implement individual features or modules using an SPA. For example, your product browsing and searching could be an SPA. So where I'm scrolling through the products, I'm searching for it, I'm filtering by price and category and things like that. You can make that an SPA so that the product browsing becomes super efficient and fast. After that, when checkout begins, we get into another SPA, which is capturing the user's shipping address, billing information, and so on. So that can be another SPA. Okay, so they don't have to be built as a single piece. It's perfectly okay to break them up and create them separately. Okay, having said that, having set the stage, let's go into AngularJS and see what it can do for us. AngularJS really makes it easy for us to create SPAs, despite all the challenges and some of the best practices I talked about. That could be, you might think that it's difficult to do, but AngularJS really makes it simple for us. Okay, so at the same time, AngularJS gives us multiple different options. Okay, there's not a single way of doing SPA in AngularJS. Something to keep that in mind, because many of you might think, okay, SPA in AngularJS means route service. Not necessarily. There is other options available which might be easier and more suited for the task. So let's go through them all. Excuse me. The most basic option is showing and hiding elements using directives like ngIf, ngShow, and so on, ngSwitch. One of my first SPAs I implemented using simply ngSwitch. That worked well. So if you know AngularJS, if some of you are absolutely new to AngularJS, you may not understand what I'm saying, but if you know AngularJS, these are fairly basic directives that we start to use early on in any application. And we use this to hide and show elements within the page. So you can use something like that. And I'm not going to get into the details of how this works because they are fairly basic stuff in AngularJS. So let's take a look at the intermediate option. Excuse me. The intermediate option uses the different views in the page are designed using different separate HTML files. We call them the template files. So each view gets its own template file, and we pull in the template files as we need, and we show that view within the page. So for that, we use the ng-include directive. So what ng-include does is that it uses Ajax to pull in the HTML content for a view and then renders the view within the page. And finally, we have the most advanced option, which is using the route service. And we'll take a look at in more detail the intermediate option and the advanced option here. So let's see how to use the ng include directive. Fairly easy to do, actually. So here I have my main HTML page. So that's the main page that gets loaded. Within that, I'm trying to display a view using ng include. So the ng include has an attribute called src, which takes a model variable or an expression, and this expression evaluates to a URL for the external template file for the view, and then ng include would pull in that template file using Ajax and then insert the content of the HTML in this location. Okay, that's two things going on. First, get the HTML that this expression is pointing to using Ajax, and then insert that HTML content in this location. And if that HTML has any AngularJS code, evaluate that as well. So this helps us break up an application in multiple different view-specific template files and helps us design the application better. So in this particular example, I have a controller called flow control, and I have a model variable called page state, and which has a property called template, which is set to shipping.html. And as a result, page state.template is going to evaluate to shipping.html, and ng include is going to then include that file and render the view in that location. And if I, using program, if I change the value of this page state.template property, if I change the model variable to something else, Angular is going to immediately pull in that other HTML file and render the view here. So to switch between the views, all we have to do is change the scope.pageState model variable. And as the variable changes, Angular is going to pull in the different view specific template files and then show them to the browser, to the user. Okay, it's quite simple to work with. Any question about ng include before I go forward? Okay, if you have any question, please post in the chat. Okay, after that we go to the most advanced option in AngularJS to create SPA, which is the route service. And the route service actually kind of builds on top of what I talked about in ng include. We're still going to be building view-specific template files in its own separate template file. Okay, every view is built using its own separate template file. And we're going to be pulling in these template files from the main HTML page and render that to the user. We're still going to be doing that, except we are not going to be writing code. Like in this case, we have code that is controlling what view gets displayed. Instead of doing that, we're going to be mapping the URL that's displayed on the address bar of the browser. We're going to be mapping the URL to a view. So to see a view, all I have to do is change the URL in the address bar. And you don't need to write any code. So a lot of benefits come from this new model compared to ng include, and we'll discuss them. And one thing to keep in mind is that the route service is not available from the core AngularJS. This is something you need to separately download and add the script to your HTML. It's not built into AngularJS. It's an add-on module. So why do we care about the route service compared to the ng include? With the route service, the views can be bookmarked. The reason it can be bookmarked is that, as I said earlier, that we are controlling what view gets displayed by changing the URL. So we are tweaking the URL, and so the URL tells us what view gets displayed. So that way we can bookmark the URL and have a deep link within the view navigation hierarchy. I can get right to a specific view. And also the user can navigate back. So as the user clicks on the back button of the browser, they can navigate back to the history, and the views will be changing accordingly. And to navigate between the views, we can just set up hyperlinks, and we don't have to write any code. So let's see how that works. First, we need to create a map between the URL and the view templates. And this map is created using the route provider, which is the accompanying provider for the route service. Every service can have a provider, and because our service is called route, the provider is called route provider. And we are setting up the map at the config phase of the application, which happens very early on as Angular is initializing. So during the config phase, using the route service provider, we set up the URL map. And setting up the map is fairly simple. We are saying when the URL has /cart in it, display the view shopcart.html. When the URL has shipping in it, display the view called ship.html. And if none of these URLs match our route table, as a fallback, use the option /cart, which means shop cart will be displayed. So if it's neither /cart nor shipping, then cart will be displayed. That's the fallback option. So that's typically the way we set up the route table. So again, here we are mapping the URL to the views. So next, in our main page of the application, we need to show the view, and we do that using the ngView tag, the ngView directive. And the way ngView works is very similar to the ngInclude. ngView is going to look at the current URL and try to map it to the views in the route table that I showed you earlier. And then based on that, it's going to pull in the HTML for the view using Ajax and render that HTML in this location. Okay. So to navigate between the views, all I have to do now is set up the URL correctly. So the URL looks like this. So /checkout.html is my main page of the application. That's the single page that the application loads first. Then comes the hash mark, and then / and then the URL that's in the route table. So it's checkout.html hash /cart. So this /cart is what gets mentioned in the route table. So this comes after the hash mark. So once again, take a look at the URL, which is /checkout.html hash mark /cart. So if that's my URL, ngView is going to show shopcart.html. If on the other hand, my URL is going to show ship.html, and so on. Okay. So all you have to do now is compose the URL correctly, and to do that using HTML is very simple. We just create a hyperlink href, and we set the href to /cart, /billing, and so on. So as the user clicks on these links, user will be navigating between the views. Instead of navigating between pages, there will be navigation between views going on, and the URL address is going to change in the address bar, which can be bookmarked, which can be shared, and the back button is going to work as expected. Okay, so that concludes the way the route service works and how to create a single page application that follows certain best practices using AngularJS. And this is very high-level overview. Obviously, we don't. There's a lot. There is some details you need to know to actually start building SPAs, but this just gives you the concept. And we have training courses or other tutorials that you can take to learn more about the route service. And otherwise, that concludes my presentation. So what did we learn here today? That the primary reason for using SPA is greater user satisfaction, because we'll be able to transition between views really fast, and we'll be able to cache data better and share them between the views. So especially if you have a very slow backend system, like legacy system that are slow to respond, you're able to now cache the data with a single network call and then use the data over and over again. And we learned that AngularJS has various different options to create SPA. You can use NGA for ng include. These are some of the basic options. The problem with these options is that you don't get the link shareability and bookmarkability. Also, the back button doesn't work with these options. So if you need these two other options, then you need to go with the route service. That gives you the history, the shareability, and so on. Okay, so that concludes my presentation. If you have any more questions, please feel free to post a question in the chat, and I'll do my best to answer the questions. Otherwise, again, thank you for coming down during this lunchtime, and I hope it was useful. And please join us for the future webinars as well.